happen. At some point in my life, by the time Rachel was 3, she began to compete with other people and other things in my life. And the reason I would say in that case it took, I don't know, it was really earlier than 3. I was having some good times before then. But she had infantile spasms and was very, very sick for a period of time. So we'd kind of gone on an upward trajectory, really pretty doing well as a family, and then there was a time she was really sick and waiting for her to come back and figuring out how that was going to be. So it took a little longer before I could say that my life was pretty balanced. One of the things as I started off by saying in the beginning of this, is that I was a writer of fiction, not interested in nonfiction. There was really in 1983 no memoir craze, and I was not interested, couldn't imagine writing a memoir anyhow. So one of the things I wanted to do when my life was slightly more in balance was to go back to writing. And so I abandoned what I'd been working on, and I started to write this book, and it had some boring plot, and it had a subplot about a family with a child who was less than perfect, and my agent nagged me to give her a piece, and I gave her a piece, and she said the main plot of this book is really boring, but the subplot's really interesting. Would you consider writing this as nonfiction? And I said, no. What? I don't know how to do that. And eventually I did, for reasons I'll explain in a couple of minutes. And I did because I wanted to write what life was like for someone else. I wanted to take somebody else in the front door of my house and say, this is what life is like the morning after you wake up and hear that your child is blind. This is what life is like a month later. This is what life is like 6 months later. I also wanted to write, I wanted any reader to read it, but I also imagined the person I was going through the library, frantically going through, looking for books that would give me some reflection of what my life was like, and so I wrote it for that person I had never met. The book begins when I'm pregnant, and 15 of the 18 chapters take place in the first year, and it ends, the last little piece of the book is really ages 1 to 4, when she's a toddler. It does chronicle Rachel's medical and developmental ups and downs, the infantile spasms and the seizures, the evidence of vision, but it is overwhelmingly our story, family story. Something, believe it or not, that I failed to see until a couple of years ago. I didn't choose the name Loving Rachel or the subtitle A Family's Journey from Grief, which I think is not on the new edition. I hated the title, and I hated the subtitle. We made many family jokes about Journey from Grief. Again, it was only when I started writing the second book that I started thinking, yeah, actually this book was about loving Rachel. What a great title. And in fact, it was about a journey from grief to accommodation. That's what that was about. I didn't see it. It took me many, 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 many years to actually get the perspective of seeing it. Well, so shortly after that book was published, I gave a talk in the Livingston Public Library in Livingston, New Jersey, and when I finished the talk, I did a little Q&A, and a woman came over, raised her hand and said, will you write another book about Rachel? And I said, no, absolutely not, under no circumstances. And she had introduced herself as a mother of a 14-year-old with developmental disabilities. It's like, I told the story, I don't need to write about it anymore. I thought I had nothing more to say, because at that point, after the book was about, I thought, oh yeah, I wrote the story about the fact that I heard these awful words, the worst thing I could possibly imagine, as a person I've described as with no experience with disability whatsoever, the worst thing, and I loved her just as she was. That seemed to me the story. I had no place to go from there. As the mother of a 25-year-old, I can see that the story I told was about us. It was about the beginning, her beginning, and ours. It was a tiny speck in her life, 1 year of 25, and that I hadn't really begun to tell the story of what happened as I gradually opened my arms. Because if you haven't done it yet, one day you're going to open your arms and you're going to let go of your child. And then one day you're going to open your front door and you're going to let your child out of the house. And I mean this also in a metaphorical way. Time is going to pass. Your tears will have long dried by then. It's like, what tears? I cried that hard? Because you're going to be really busy helping your child find a place in the world. For many of us, it does mean rolling up our sleeves and getting ready to fight. Because when you open your front door, you're asking a lot of people to look after your child. You're asking people to be respectful, to make sure that your child's needs are met, to enjoy her, to work with her, to find her heart and soul,